A turning point may be approaching in your life, one that Carl Jung reportedly hesitated to discuss openly. He hinted at a terrifying psychological shift, concealing his cautions in lesser-known texts, aware of the ruinous implications. If you are an empath, someone who has long absorbed others' pain, shouldered responsibilities that were never yours, and offered parts of yourself to people who did not merit them, sacrificing your emotional health for those who would never return such care, you are nearing a cliff that many empaths fail to notice until the moment of collapse. Comment 1 if you have ever felt yourself edging toward that cliff. Comment 2 if you're only now realizing you've been standing on it. What was the moment that made you see something had to change? If you feel these psychology sharings are helpful and relatable, you're welcome to become a channel member and stay with us on a deeper journey. As a member, you'll get early and extended access to more in-depth practical content that you can apply in everyday life. What follows claims to be more than standard psychology. It is a forbidden insight into consciousness that Jung gleaned from his most extreme patient's individuals, so thoroughly transformed that they no longer fit ordinary categories. It challenges everything you believe about being an empath. This is not merely about toughness, resilience, or improved boundaries. It concerns the instant when an empath's radiance does not merely fade, but changes into something wholly different. What Jung termed shadow integration, a fusion so total that it can yield a presence more formidable than any narcissist might imagine. You can sense it accumulating within you, can't you? A gradual, relentless fatigue that sleep never resolves. A marrow-deep weariness, born of years spent absorbing other people's emotional debris. A swelling resentment toward those you have helped, healed and rescued people who presumed upon your gifts, and kept asking for more while offering nothing back. A quiet, shadowed question arises: why continue to pour yourself out for those who would never reciprocate and who would disappear the instant you cease to meet their emotional demands? You have likely labeled these reactions as negativity, defects to be cured or transcended, evidence perhaps of being a bad person for even having them. Yet Jung viewed them not as spiritual lapses or moral shortcomings, but as signals of an imminent transformation, one that could either annihilate you or generate something unprecedented within your awareness. This is a process for which mainstream psychology lacks an adequate framework. Many empaths do not pass through this passage unscathed. Those who do, Jung suggested with both awe and dread, emerge beyond the usual binaries of healer versus destroyer, light versus dark, good versus evil. They become integrated individuals who hold an immense capacity for compassion alongside full access to their psychological darkness, and possess the discernment to apply each facet with exacting precision. Jung referred to this process as the empath's dark night of the soul. Over decades of observing exceptional people, those driven past their limits yet transformed instead of shattered, he concluded that the darkness is not collapse, but metamorphosis as elemental as a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Yet the emergent butterfly retains not only the power to nurture, but also the capacity to deliver a targeted psychological sting that neutralizes predators with chilling effectiveness. Empaths often have a distinctive psychological architecture that enables them to take in and metabolize emotional energy in ways others neither grasp nor can imitate. For years, perhaps decades, you have used this capacity to mend, to comfort, to function as a refuge, to be the one people seek when they crave unconditional understanding and acceptance. Yet Jung's deeper study led him to a sobering insight. The very mechanisms that enable exceptional compassion can, once turned inward and fused with a shadow, the disowned, suppressed, and stigmatized aspects of the self, also enable exceptional destruction. Recall each person who exploited your kindness. Remember every narcissist who siphoned your energy without reciprocation. Consider each toxic figure who weaponized your empathy, inducing guilt for having limits or needs. Count the moments you were labeled too sensitive, too emotional, too intense, or too invested in what others dismissed. Revisit every boundary you erased in love's name, each fragment of self you surrendered to those who never valued the offering, and every instance you muted your needs to preserve someone else's comfort. None of that absorbed darkness. None of the pain, betrayals, disappointments, or violations has evaporated. It has settled in the psyche's depths, fermenting and changing, biding its time, until your conscious mind can no longer confine it within tidy narratives of forgiveness or spiritual transcendence. Jung's unsettling conclusion was that empaths do not merely take in light love and positive affect. They take in everything. Each cruel intent, manipulative scheme, narcissistic tactic, and psychological assault aimed at you has been absorbed, examined, indexed, and archived by your unconscious with the same exactness used to register kindness and love. You have unintentionally become an authority on human darkness, not by elective study, but by directly ingesting the shadow content others cast upon you year after year, even as you remained committed to compassion and understanding. Many empaths fail to notice that while tending to others, serving as sources of light, love, and support, they have also assembled an unparalleled practical understanding of manipulation, cruelty, and psychological warfare. Each attempt at gaslighting has revealed its inner mechanics. Every controlling person has mapped which levers trigger which reactions. Every energy drainer has demonstrated how emotion can be extracted and repurposed. You have completed an unintentional masterclass in darkness while deliberately attending to the light. This yields a psychological synthesis that Jung regarded as both compelling and alarming. Here his caution becomes most dire, taking him into territory he resisted yet could not dismiss. When an empath reaches the point of rupture, no longer able to sustain the illusion that self-sacrifice will redeem the world, recognizing that their light has been systematically harvested by those who will neither reciprocate nor even acknowledge it, something unprecedented reorganizes within their psyche. The accumulated darkness, indexed cruelty, and internalized knowledge of human frailty and manipulation do not dissolve or vanish through spiritual discipline. They integrate. They become available. The empath is altered from a healer into a presence Jung could only characterize as psychologically catastrophic for anyone who persists in exploiting empathic people. You may already sense this integration, commencing a sharpening insight into others' motives. A newfound capacity to pierce manipulations that once unsettled or wounded you. A sobering recognition of past naivete about human nature, and of the time and energy spent on those unworthy of it. Perhaps you've also noticed diminishing patience for excuses, reduced willingness to enable dysfunction, and waning interest in serving as an emotional receptacle, along with less concern for winning approval from people whose judgments no longer matter. These changes do not signal coldness or the loss of empathy. They indicate proximity to a threshold that will change not only your perception of the world, but also how the world encounters you once you refuse to be its emotional buffer. Jung examined empaths who passed through this darker transformation people driven beyond breaking, and then re-emerging fundamentally changed. What he observed both riveted and unnerved him more than most of his prior cases. These individuals kept their full empathic range, their depth of feeling and connection. Yet they also acquired something further that made them extraordinarily dangerous to would-be exploiters and manipulators. They had cultivated what he termed shadow empathy, the capacity to sense not only what others require to heal and grow, but also what would undo them, what would fracture them, expose their weakest points, and render them defenseless in the psyche. They could register a person's pain and provide solace, or identify the exact language that would intensify that pain past endurance. They perceived insecurities well enough to soothe them or to leverage those same insecurities for maximal psychological harm. They sensed others' fears and could instill courage or weaponize those fears to induce paralyzing terror. They had become psychological shapeshifters, capable of serving as supreme healers or as the most ruinous adversaries their counterparts had ever faced. Which role they assumed hinged solely on their moral appraisal of whether the individual merited healing or deserved dismantling. The most unsettling finding in Jung's work was that these transformed empaths did not turn wantonly destructive or forfeit their ethics. Instead, they grew surgically precise at detecting and neutralizing threats to the innocent while preserving their love for sincere people, their instinct to defend the vulnerable, and their devotion to truth, justice, and authentic connection. They also acquired an almost preternatural talent for dismantling anyone who endangered their loved ones or values, seeing through masks and schemes with X-ray clarity, and meeting psychological assaults with counters so devastating that aggressors doubted their own sanity. Comment 1. If you have experienced this sharpened X-ray clarity in reading motives. Comment 2. If it still feels distant, but possible. When did you first notice your perception cutting through someone's facade? They became, in Jung's phrasing, darkness, wielding light as a weapon against those who treat light as prey. They learned to match fire with fire, answer manipulation with more skillful manipulation, and counter psychological warfare with strategies of a higher order. All the while, they preserved an unshakable moral clarity that rendered their actions justified, not cruel. Functionally, they became the mind's immune system able to detect and eradicate dangers to emotional and spiritual health with ruthless efficiency. This evolution frightens narcissists, manipulators, and energy vampires like nothing else, because their entire modus operandi depends on exploiting empathic reactions, locating people who will soak up their toxicity without resistance and provide consequence-free emotional fuel. When such predators meet an empath with integrated shadow, someone who wields darkness as deftly as light and can outmaneuver them while retaining ethical high ground, their psychological scaffolding collapses. They suddenly confront an opponent who anticipates their tactics, predicts their moves, counters with ease, and reverses their own weapons upon them with brutal effectiveness. Yet the shift is deeper and more disruptive to the current social fabric. The dark empath gains not only the power to neutralize aggressors, but also the capacity to discern shadow potential in all people. They can perceive nascent narcissism in those not yet fully formed, detect manipulative impulses in the self-described good sense, cruelty beneath kindness, selfishness behind generosity, and vice cloaked as virtue. Such penetrating X-ray awareness can either crush them under the burden of humanity's naked nature or forge them into guardians of authenticity, unlike anything previously witnessed. Jung's forbidden caution was blunt. The world is not ready for empaths who fully integrate shadow, who handle darkness as deliberately as light and attain a psychological completeness few ever reach. Society tacitly relies on empaths staying light, only acting as shock absorbers, healing depots, and dumping grounds for the collective's darkness. The broader structure presumes there will always be people who take in toxicity without resistance, mend dysfunction without insisting on reform, and give without expecting reciprocity. Once empaths outgrow this assignment, navigating darkness as fluently as light, and shifting from unpaid emotional labor to instruments of accountability, they endanger any system built on exploiting their nature. They turn manipulation-proof unreadable to emotional leeches, and lethal to those who would abuse their past innocence. They shift from prey to apex predator, able to track and dismantle threats to the innocent. This process, once initiated, cannot be halted or micromanaged. It is an evolutionary response to prolonged psychological assault, a metamorphosis that happens when survival systems fuse with empathic capacities after being driven past all reasonable limits. You'll recognize it as your sensitivity to others' opinions fades. Manipulation attempts seem pitiable rather than dangerous, and facades become uncomfortably transparent to you. You'll also learn precisely which psychological levers to pull to shape outcomes in any exchange. Most disconcerting, you may take some satisfaction in this power not from cruelty, but from the relief of finally being able to defend yourself after years of defenselessness. Much like someone who, long disarmed, finally holds tools of defense, you'll notice you can unsettle narcissists with a glance and silence manipulators with a handful of precisely chosen words. You'll be able to erect boundaries so impermeable that toxic individuals steer clear without any explicit warning. Then it will dawn on you, years of serving as everyone's emotional support absorbing darkness, while emitting light, have granted you a de facto doctorate in human psychology, surpassing what many trained clinicians attain. You'll grasp human motivation, manipulation, and vulnerability at a level that feels nearly supernatural, and you'll be able to choose whether to use that insight to heal or to dismantle based on your judgment of each person's intentions and behavior. Jung found that empaths who complete this shift can become some of humanity's strongest healers and guardians, people who create truly safe spaces for growth, while also detecting and neutralizing psychological predators with chilling efficiency. Yet they are also among the most perilous opponents, combining an empath's knowledge of what would wound most with the technical skill to deliver that wound with surgical accuracy. Comment 1. If you believe using shadow empathy to neutralize harm is justified when protecting the innocent. Comment 2. If you worry it risks becoming a slippery slope. Where do you personally draw the line? They gain the capacity to heal those sincerely seeking growth, while also being able to dismantle at the psychological level anyone who threatens the innocent. They become psychological warriors battling on dimensions most people never notice, fighting human darkness, while remaining devoted to human light. They stand as living embodiments of justice, empowered, and of compassion, safeguarded by the readiness to end its exploitation. Jung's haunting question, the reason he hesitated to publish, was whether humanity could tolerate beings with both boundless empathy and full access to psychological darkness, able to decide moment by moment to heal or to destroy, according to their own moral calculus. He feared such empaths could act as judge, jury, and executioner of the psyche, deciding who merits compassion or destruction by internal values rather than external legal or social rules. He also worried they could grow too powerful and autonomous, seeing through the illusions and lies that sustain the present social order. He questioned what would occur when empaths refused to keep absorbing collective darkness and began returning it to its origin, shifting from victims to enforcers of psychological accountability beyond any authority's control. Yet Jung also found reason for hope. Empaths who navigate integration successfully do not abandon their core devotion to love, truth, and justice. They simply acquire the power to uphold these values in ways that render conventional authority structures less necessary. They become embodiments of genuine morality, supported by psychological power, capable of reshaping reality through their grasp of consciousness and their will to defend what they cherish. As this change begins, darkness rising to meet your light, your psyche reorganizing around power and accountability. Remember, you are not turning evil, losing your soul, or sinking into the same darkness that once harmed you. You are becoming whole. You're not losing empathy or the ability to love and heal. You're gaining the power to defend those qualities from exploitation. You aren't falling into shadow. You are learning to wield it as deliberately as you once wielded light, using darkness to protect light, not to extinguish it. The world needs empaths, fluent in both dimensions, able to heal the deserving and neutralize those who block healing. It needs people who can see both good and evil potentials in everyone and respond accordingly. It needs guardians who protect innocence without naivete, fight monsters without becoming them, and wield power responsibly because they grasp its creative and destructive capacities. Jung's closing warning was also his deepest hope, that transformed empaths would use their new power responsibly, guarding human consciousness instead of destroying it, and using integrated shadow to shield light, not smother it. How you wield shadow empathy, this near-omnipotent psychological capacity to heal or destroy, remains your choice. Choose carefully once you cross the threshold. There is no return to the naive empathy that once defined you. What follows is the part almost no one teaches: how to carry this power without letting it carry you. Jung would call this the ethical gravity of the self, the archetype of wholeness that orients the personality like a hidden star. Shadow integration is not permission to avenge. It is an initiation into discrimination discretio, the soul's faculty for precise, proportionate action. The task is to hold the tension of the opposite's mercy and severity, tenderness and boundary, until a third thing emerges, what Jung termed the transcendent function. This third is not compromise but coniunctio, a synthesis in which your light does not capitulate and your darkness does not dominate. You act from center, not from wound. Practically, this means building a temenos, a consecrated inner space where decisions are made. Before you speak the devastating truth or enforce the non-negotiable boundary, step into that inner room. Ask 3 questions. 1. Am I aiming to protect life or to punish 2? Is this intervention proportionate to the harm? 3. Will I be able to live with the person I become after this shadow empathy sharpens your perception? The self supplies your measure. When measure fails, power curdles into the very predation you overcame. The psyche will send guidance if you let it. Track your dreams when the warrior motif appears. Look for the wounded child nearby. When a serpent coils, see whether it guards treasure or poisons the well. Use active imagination to dialogue with figures of your inner court: the healer, the judge, the guardian at the gate. Let each speak. Integration is a parliament of archetypes, not a coup by one part that calls itself truth. Remember, too, that individuation is never solitary heroics. Find 1 or 2 witnesses, not admirers, but equals who can mirror inflation and name avoidance. Predators dread mirrors. So should you when they are missing. Power kept in secrecy swells. Power submitted to view becomes accountable. Create rituals of return, a weekly inventory of where you chose tenderness, where you chose steel, and whether each choice served wholeness. If you erred, repair quickly. A swift apology is not weakness. It is proof that you serve something larger than victory. You will notice a paradox the more faithfully you submit shadow power to the self, the less often you need to wield it. Presence does the work. Boundaries announce themselves. Manipulators lose interest when they find no purchase. This is the alchemy Jung loved. Solve it coagula. Dissolve the old innocence that enabled harm, then recoagulate into a form that cannot be fed upon. Your empathy becomes solar warmth under governance, rather than a bonfire that anyone may plunder. Let this be your north. Not do I deserve to wield this, but what serves life here. Sometimes life is served by a gentle hand. Sometimes by the removal of access. Sometimes by the word that ends a cycle. Individuation does not make you nicer. It makes you true. And truth, when married to love and escorted by shadow, is not merely bright. It is just. You will become something unprecedented, what Jung only glimpsed in his deepest studies, either a next step in human evolution or a perilous departure from human nature. The frightening moment when an empath goes dark is not a fall from grace. It is an ascent to psychological integration. Few ever reach a completion that harmonizes light and shadow consciously. If you're a true empath pushed past your limits, the question isn't whether this will happen. It's what you will do with the unprecedented power formed when light and shadow unify. When you cease being darkness's victim and become its master, Jung's forbidden warning rings through time with terror and hope. The world is about to learn what empaths become when they stop absorbing darkness and start wielding it. Are you ready to know who you are once you no longer fear your own psychological power? Comment 1. If you are ready to integrate your shadow and step into this power. Comment 2. If you choose to remain light only for now. What would you need to feel safe taking the next step? If you'd love to keep receiving more meaningful videos about psychology, healing, and understanding yourself better, consider supporting the channel by becoming a member. Your registration not only unlocks more valuable content for you, but also gives me the motivation to keep creating and sharing regularly.